Welcome everyone to our global read today. Thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it. This program is being brought to you by the Charter for Compassion. So if you want to help support this program, please go to charterforcompassion.org and hit the donate button, and we would really appreciate it. Uh, as you know, we have a really special guest with us today, but we have a bonus today. We have two really wonderful guests. We have co-host James Brandon, and we have with us author Ben Sines. Before I introduce them officially, I'd like to just point out a couple of things. One is that if you're here with us live, there is a little icon on the bottom of your screen that's like a little bubble with three dots on it. That's our chat room. We would welcome any of your questions anytime during this session. You can type those in and we will address those later on in the program after our two authors have a chance to talk with one another about Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe, which is why you've tuned in. So thank you again for being here. So first I'd like to introduce our guest host today, James Brandon. He produced and played the central role of Joshua in an international tour of Terence McNally's Corpus Christi. Did that for a decade and is co-director of the documentary film based on their journey, Corpus Christi, Playing with Redemption. He's the co-founder of the I Am Love campaign, an arts-based initiative bridging the faith-based and LGBTQ plus communities, and serves on the powwow steering committee for the Bay Area American Indian Two Spirits in San Francisco. Brandon is a contributing writer for the Huffington Post, Believe Out Loud, and Spirituality and Health magazine. Ziggy, Stardust and Me is his first novel. You can visit him at justbjb.com, and I'll put that in the chat room in just a little bit so you can see that. So welcome. Thank you, James Brandon, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce to you our guest author, Mr. Benjamin Sines. He was born in 1954 in his grandmother's house, and during his work, during his youth, he worked at various jobs, painting apartments, roofing houses. Oh my gosh, I could use you today. I've got some painting to do at my house, and working even for a janitorial service. He eventually became a writer and professor, and became an associate professor in the MFA Creative Writing program at the University of Texas in El Paso. He is a novelist, poet, essayist, and writer of children's books. There's so much more I can say about him, but I'd rather spend the time visiting with him and talking with him about his book, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. Thank you both for being here with us and spending your generous time with us this morning. And I will leave it to you for now until it's question time.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. So I am honored. Today here is Ben's book, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. It is filled with, I used to have thousands of tabs on this, but I thought it would look like an insane patient if I did that right now. So I took some out. But this book has been, it's my go-to. It's the first book I read where two boys were falling in love, and it inspired me as a writer to become a writer, actually. So I am truly honored and thrilled to be here today to be interviewing Ben and to talk about this book that has not only moved me, but has moved hundreds of thousands of millions around the globe. It truly is an inspired book that continues to find movement even after being published 7 years ago. And I guess I wanted just to jump in. I thought I'd start simply to talk little things about the book, and then we can deep dive into stuff about you as well. But just to start off in a general sense, I'm sure everybody who's watching today already has read Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. They haven't. I just wanted to get your take on what this book is. How would you describe this book briefly, even after 7 years after it's been published? How would you describe it today?
Well, I thought about that because I was, a few years ago, I was the keynote speaker at a writers conference in Austin. And there was agents there. You know, agents go and then people can pitch their books. And I thought, how would I pitch my book? Because they have like very little time to pitch a book. And then we can talk about your book. And so I said, I wonder what would happen if I went up to one of these agents and said, look, I have this book and it's about set in 1987 in El Paso, Texas, and two Latino boys fall in love. What do you think? I think they would have said like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to read that book. You know, 1987, two Latino boys, they fall in love. I don't know about that. But that's really not a description of the book in some ways. It's kind of, because it really is about, it is a coming of age book, and it is a love story, but it's a love story about a boy who meets another boy, and through that boy, he learns what friendship is, and that's a love, and he learns to love him as a friend, and he realizes that he's in love with him, you know, but he also falls in love with his parents, and he also falls in love with Dante's parents, and he also falls in love with himself.
Yes.
And so it's a love story on many, many levels. And I think that's why the book works, because it's not just about Aristotle and Dante. It's about family. It's about what it's like to be 15. You know, it's not a great age, you know, being 15. And like, I don't, you know, I think I was miserable at 15, absolutely miserable. And I didn't like myself very much. I didn't know myself very well. But on the other hand, part of self-hate is sometimes being a little bit arrogant. You know, sometimes it was that way. Mine came through as like, I thought I was intellectually superior to everybody. You know, like, you know, it kind of helped me because I didn't go for the peer pressure stuff. Like I said to myself, you know, I didn't go for that because I thought, well, who wants to be like these morons? You know, like, so I just kind of went my own way, and that was really good for me because I didn't need anybody. In some ways, I'd always hated myself, but in other ways, I kind of had a separation thing. Like, I knew I was smart and I was curious about the world, and I believed in that part of myself. Yeah. When it came to anything else, all bets were off, you know, but I did. I had a certain belief in myself, and even as an adult, because I think that I did hate myself for so long.
Yeah.
But I always believed in my own talent, but that was not, I didn't associate that talent with me. You know, there was kind of an odd thing. That makes sense?
It does. It does. And I'm wondering, what did you associate that part of yourself with? Do you know what I mean? Like, you had that core belief in yourself, and even amongst all of the misery you felt at that age, which I similarly went through a time when I was 15, that was the hardest time of my life. But I also had a kind of core belief in self. I'm wondering where that came from for you. How did you hone that and maintain that even through those times?
Well, I don't know. I think that, you know, I think that I was really loved by my mother, or felt loved by my mother. And maybe I felt that she loved me because I was good in school, and that was reinforced. You know, I was smart when I was the one that was the kid of the seven that was like smart and did good in school and all of that. And so they were proud of me in that way. So, but I didn't feel as if, and maybe for my father, though I was never highly favored, but never unloved, I just thought there was something wrong with me. I think I was rejecting my dad's notions of masculinity and didn't know it, but he did. And I think that put him off. Because he would say, when he would say, when he'd get mad at me, why do you want to be like your mother? A man is supposed to want to be like his father.
Yeah.
And then when I said, well, Dad, Mom's a nicer person. You know, and I didn't have an answer for that. I just was just like, I was drawn to the kind of person that she was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a gender thing for me.
No.
It was just like, oh, why wouldn't I want to be like my mother?
Right.
And because she was kind and she could talk to people and she was communicative and there wasn't any there's no confusions with my mother.
Right.
You know, she loved you and she let you know. She talked to you and she could communicate herself to you and what she felt you needed to do for your life. But she did speak in vague generalities, which I used to, at 15, she's like, okay. I said, I remember coming home one day and I said, I hate Charlie Torres. And I walked in the kitchen door and she says, oh, she was making dinner. She goes, oh, you don't hate anybody. And I thought to myself, oh, yes, I do. And then she says, and then she goes, mijito. And she was rolling out tortillas and making dinner. You know, there's only two things you need to do in this life. You need to be happy, and you need to learn how to forgive other people. Now, later on, I realized that the two were intimately connected. But at 15, I said to myself, rolling my eyes to myself, saying, oh, no worries, no big deal. Just be happy and learn to forgive other people. I got that one, Mom.
Yeah.
You know, because it didn't, they just seemed such big, being happy seemed, I guess I knew what it was as a concept, you know, and I had moments of happiness, but be happy and forgive other people. And I'm thinking to myself, Charlie Torres, I'm not going to forgive him. He's an asshole, you know.
Well, and it's interesting. I loved hearing you talk about your relationship with your mom, and you have in many interviews in the past. And I feel that when I read those interviews, and I can feel that connection you have with her, and it's so evident, even just now as you're talking about that conversation you and your mom had at that time. That just reminded me of the very first scene with Dante, with Ari and his mom in the kitchen, when they're just talking to each other, and they have this really kind of, they know each other. And I love their connection on the page. It's so organic and so healthy, and it's so loving. And something I found so beautiful, I mean, I found every page there's something beautiful in this book, but what I found really poignant for me when I first read it was the parents, the familial connections that these two boys have with their parents. For me, I did not have that necessarily growing up. And it was kind of an escapism for me to read it through these two boys' eyes, to see a safe connection to parents that they had. And I think what I love about that is that it allowed me to come into this world in a new way that felt safe to me. And I know it's some sort slightly idealistic to think that every parent, you know, is going to be super supportive of their kids who are coming out, obviously, but I love that existed in this world. And it seems to me it was a reflection of partly how you were raised by your mom too.
Yes, but I also think that because I'm really aware that whether I like it or not, that I'm writing as a Latino,
yeah,
and representing Latinos, which is a little bit unfair because I don't represent all Latinos, but there is a huge idea that Mexican Americans, Latinos are reject their children because they're gay. That happens not to be true. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying all parents do, but I know a lot of, you know, gay men, and their parents don't like that they're gay, but they're not unloved. They just don't talk about it but they're not rejected and they're not thrown out on the street. And so I wanted to kind of correct that. And I do think that there's a lot of parents, whether they're Latino or not, who do love their kids. And they go through their own confusions on that, you know, but they don't reject their kids, you know, like parents are people. And the sign that we're growing up when we're kids is that we realize they are people and they're not just our parents. They're, you know, they're not just about, it's not just about us. They don't disappear when we walk out of the room. They are people.
Right.
And they may be our parents, but they're so much more than that. And when we realize them and see them as people, we are freer to love them. You know, when we just see them as our parents and that's all they are, then we're harder on them because they're always going to, we can always find a reason why our parents didn't measure up, right? You know, my dad was not exactly the dad I wanted, you know, but he's the dad I got. And when I saw him as a person, when I really saw him as a person, it was much easier to love him because he might have not been the great dad, but he was a good person. And when I saw him out in the world, I realized that he was a good person. And I said, wow, you know, that made it easier for me because everything's not just about me. But I do think that many parents love their sons and daughters. And, you know, Dante's parents, you know, his parents loved, this is their only child. They loved Dante. And of course, his father is incredibly affectionate, as some men are. And his mother isn't particularly affectionate. That doesn't mean she doesn't love him, but she also is like the person says, you know, that kid just needs to just straighten up sometimes. And she's on him because he needs that. And she doesn't mind doing that because she's a therapist. And how she loves people is she takes care of business.
Yeah.
And she's there. And so we might think of that kind of person as a male, but men do that. But in this family, there's, if you want to call it traditionally, a role reversal. Though I would like to think that that whatever we think is a feminine quality is just a human quality. Yeah. We assign those qualities to men and to women, but they're not innate in us. We're taught to play those roles, and I think gay men are taught to play certain roles, and a lot of us fall into that. You know, we fall into the kind of same, I think, toxic. Oh my God, my dog just did something here.
No, you're good.
Let me see what I can do. Can you see me?
Yep,
no, you're good.
Let's see. I don't know what to do because she did something.
Can you hear us?
I
can hear you. Can you see me?
Yeah,
Yep.
we can see you. Yeah, you're good.
I gotta get Boo Boo out of here. Oh, maybe I don't want to do anything because I'm gonna feel like there we go. I can see you again.
Good. Okay, there. Yeah.
So you know, like we men put each other, and we follow the same stereotypes, the same kinds of ideas of masculinity that are traditional, even though we're gay. You know, some guys only like masculine men, whatever that is, and some men prefer feminine men, whatever that is, and all of these things, you know, like, and I'm thinking, like, you know what, the great thing for me, the great opportunity for gay men and women or anybody that's alternative to that kind of paradigm of male and female, it gives us an opportunity to stop and think, all right, then, I'm not like them. So maybe I can get to decide what kind of man I want to be.
Yes.
And that's an opportunity to reflect on that. And I'm sorry to say that a lot of gay men and women don't reflect on that. Mm-hmm. They don't. We've lost an opportunity, and there it all is. And so at some point in my life, I said, what kind of man do I want to be? I want to be a kind man. And that's not easy. It's not always easy to be kind. It's not always easy to be forgiving. It's not always easy to be generous. Uh, but if we want to be those things, then we can make it happen.
Mhm.
I used to think that my mother was all of those things because she was that way by nature. I don't think that's true. I think she wanted to be a certain kind of person, and she became that kind of person. And that was hard, and that was a lot of work.
Mm.
But, you know, is generosity a genetic thing? No. Uh, is a lack of generosity a genetic thing? It's something that we ultimately choose. We don't even know we're choosing it. Maybe we're following models before us. But love is a decision, and hate is a decision.
Yeah.
Even though we decide not to. I had a discussion with someone once and it was on Facebook. It was a friend of mine. And they said they were, because the governor of Colorado is gay and they have a family.
Uh-huh.
And he says to me about, well, these children aren't going to have a chance. They're obviously going to turn out to be gay. And then I got on him and I said, well, you know, I have to tell you something. I grew up in a straight family with 7 siblings. And all the messages that I got is be straight, be straight, be straight, be straight. You know what? I guess I didn't get the memo because I'm not. That's not how it works.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. We didn't choose this.
Right.
And we're always also taught that this is a terrible thing. And so we have a hard time accepting ourselves because we don't get a message that says this is okay. And maybe at best it's okay, but what about it's beautiful? You know, to be straight is beautiful to them, and to be gay is not. But we can say to them, and I said, well, you know what? I didn't choose this. Was not raised to be gay. I did not get the messages to be gay. It doesn't work that way. We can't make homosexuals. And we can't unmake them either. But you have a choice. I don't have a choice. I have to accept myself and love myself, despite your hate. But you have a choice. You do get a choice. You get to decide whether you want to accept me as a fellow human being, or you can hate me. That's your choice. And I said, and anybody who uses God, throws them under the bus and says it's because of God, that's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
I said, own it.
Yes.
Own it. God doesn't ask you to hate me. No religion would ask you to hate me. You decide to use God to justify your hate. And that's all there is to it. So if anybody hates whatever group, don't use your religion. You own it because it's your hate. And I'm very firm about that because I do believe that we don't want to look at ourselves and be responsible for the things that we do and the things that we feel.
Yeah.
And we have to be, because that's a grown up. You know, we aren't a grown, as a society, we are not grown up. We are simply not. And I believe it's because we don't have enough citizens that are grown-ups. I mean, God knows I fight adulthood every day of my life, but still, there's an Ari and Dante living inside of me, and I hope they live inside of me forever. But being an adult means that I take responsibility for the things that I do, and I don't make excuses for it.
Mm-hmm.
And just to say, you know, I sometimes want to make excuses, and I just shut up and I said, I did that and I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, therein lies one of the secrets of the universe, I think, is taking responsibility for self in those moments and really owning that part of ourselves, no matter if it's quote unquote good or bad or not. You know, we own our feelings. And I think, to me, that's the beauty of their journey, of Ari and Dante's journey, is that they start to own their feelings in this process.
Right. And I think sometimes we do things that aren't virtues and we want to turn them into virtues.
Right.
Which is, it's crazy. Like, okay, I smoke. That's a terrible thing to do. Do not smoke. Nobody should smoke. I don't think that's a virtue. I don't think it's good. I don't, any of those things. And so I don't turn my vice. It's a vice. It is a vice. There's nothing good about it, but I still do it. That doesn't mean that I need to tell people, oh, you know, it's really, you know, they go around and they all these things that they do, and they make themselves into virtuous people, you know, or what they're doing is all right. It's not all right.
Yeah.
It's not all right. I can say to myself, this is not good, this is not all right, and I'm going to do it anyway. You know, that's also a decision. It's also
Yeah.
an addiction. But still, you know, I think we wind up doing that, like, you know, like, oh, you know, we hate someone if we're Christians. This is a virtue. I hate them because I'm a Christian and a good person, which is bullshit.
Right. Right. And, you know, so it's interesting. I just wanted to there was a few things you brought up, I wanted to ask you. One of them was you said, Ari and Dante live inside you, and you hope they live inside you forever. And I'm wondering, you know, as you wrote this story, I think, you know, we relate to our characters. They come out of us, right? So there's obviously a piece of us in each of those characters. And I'm wondering, when you wrote it, how does you relate to Ari and Dante? Who are they to you, Ben? You know,
Well, Ari is very much me in many ways. He's more really, this is my character. But Dante too. I mean, I do read poetry, and I am a poet, and I'm also an artist. And I appear to the world, if they would say, if they knew me, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, Ben's Dante." But that's because that's what I show to the world. I'm Ari. You know, when I was a kid, I used to tell my mom, "I'm going to go with my friends and stuff." And you know what I would do? I'd go walking by myself because I wanted to be alone, and I wanted to think. And a lot of times I was making myself sad or whatever, but I didn't want to be with anybody. And everybody always thought I was so happy. I went into high school friends and they said, "You were the happiest guy?" And I thought to myself, I was miserable. I was miserable.
Wow.
Well, I wasn't happy. But that's what they saw because that's what I wanted them to see.
Right.
Because I was extremely private, actually. And people didn't see me that way. So I was both of these characters, and I suppose I didn't know I was doing it when I did it. I just wrote these characters, but they did come from me. And one of the interesting things about writing this book is that I thought, you know, I had come out very late in life because I was a sexually abused kid, and you know, the thought of a man touching me wasn't exactly appealing, to say the least. And I had a real hard time with all of that. When I was in therapy and dealt with all of these things, going through PTSD, it was very complicated for me. But at the end of that, I decided, okay, well, and I want to write a book about being gay. So and as I wrote this story, I thought, well, you know, who the hell's going to read it? And then I didn't care because I don't really, when you write a book, that's not really what you're thinking, but I did. And then I wrote another book called Everything Begins and then the Kentucky Club, which was a book of short stories. So I wrote these books and I gave it to a friend of mine, an ARC, you know, an advanced reader's copy. And she read it. And she is very close to her. I'm her son's godfather. And she read the book and she called me up and she goes, "Oh, you made me cry. You always make me cry." I said, "Well, call me the King of Tears." So she says to me, "Oh, Ben, you wrote a book as a gift to yourself." And maybe it was. Maybe I wished that that's how it had been for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
And that made me sad, but it really is true. Better late than never. That's really true.
Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of joy in my life. Not that I've had these incredibly successful relationships with men, but because, you know, the only problem with being gay is that you have to date men. Okay. So, but I can really honestly say that being gay is a real gift to me. And I'm very grateful for that gift. I am, you know, and so, and I like to remind people, my straight friends and other people I speak to, and kids. I have a T-shirt. I have a company called Benjamin Inc., and we sell products. And one of the T-shirts that we're printing right now it says, When exactly did you decide to be a heterosexual? Because that's a reminder to people, a gentle reminder that think about that one.
Yeah,
You know, if you're a heterosexual, then you get to be virtuous for something that you're not responsible for.
yeah,
You know, it's like being born good looking, right? Oh, if you're good looking, what does that mean? Is that a virtue? No, it's not a virtue. That just means that your parents were good looking and you got the genes. That's all. That's not a virtue. It doesn't mean you're good. It doesn't mean that you're decent. It doesn't mean anything. It means that you sometimes get a walk on being selfish, you know. And so we have to think about what virtue is and how we look at the world, and that's important. And I think it's incumbent upon us as gay people to remind the world of their entitlement.
yeah.
You know,
That's
gay
beautiful.
people are very entitled. They're not more human than I am. The world doesn't belong to them. And so I was telling you, I had a young friend, I have some really good friends, my best friend since I was 16. They have a son and he's gay. And I was visiting him in Denver and I said, you know what? I think we should all run for office. You know what? It's our turn to screw up the world, you know, to get our chance.
Yeah.
And so, but I have to say that accepting myself as a gay man, those two books I mentioned helped me a lot. Writing Aristotle and Dante and writing Everything Begins at the Kentucky Club, which won the Penn-Faulkner Award for Fiction, which was amazing. And they placed me in the gay community, the gay intellectual community, in a beautiful way. And that's really great because then I felt I belonged to a community. And those books made me belong to a community of readers, of people, of librarians, of well, this show we're doing for the Center for Compassion. We become a part of a community. We belong to each other, and we are hardwired for connection, and we need to be connected, and we need to understand each other, because if we are not loved, if we do not touch, we die. We do. And we know that with that study they did with the children in World War II in London, when they had all these babies that they put to protect them because they were being bombed and they were in this place. And there wasn't enough caregivers. And so they fed them and stuff. They were not thriving. They were not making noise. Until everyone started picking them up. And then they began to thrive because they needed to be touched, not just fed, to be touched, to be connected. And that is really what we need. And books do that for us. It's amazing. It's just amazing how I run into people and they say, it's so fun. They don't even know me. And they'll hug me and say, I love you. but it's really sweet, but they don't really love me. They love my book.
Yeah.
And that's enough.
They love what
That's
you
enough because it's just like a hand that touched them.
Yeah.
And we need to be touched, and we need to understand each other.
Yeah. It's interesting because speaking of that, there isn't a lot of physical connection between Ari and Dante throughout the book until one of my favorite scenes. I think it's one of the most beautiful scenes I've probably ever read in a YA novel, is when Dante's giving Ari a sponge bath and shaving him. I still cry when I read that. I've read it so many times. And it's about what you're talking about. It's that moment of touch, and it's such a raw and vulnerable scene for both of them. And it's so beautifully written. And it really, to me, is it's the turning point in their relationship, because Ari, for the first time, allows himself a vulnerability with someone else he's never allowed himself before. And Dante, similarly, although he's much more open and sensitive and artistic being in an innate way, he is connecting to someone that he innately loves in a new way. And I think it's that touch that you're talking about that they share that ultimately moves their relationship forward in a new light.
That was such a hard scene to write.
I bet.
And when I thought of writing it, I thought, I don't think it'll work. And it wasn't working. But then I felt my instincts told me that this has to be there. So you just have to make it work. So it's not a long scene.
No.
I really wrote it until I thought it was right. And it felt so right. Everything in that book, I suffered over. I'm writing the sequel, and I'm suffering just terribly over it. I am. It's horrible for me in many ways. It's taken me a long time. I've been working on it for a long time, and it doesn't seem right. Some of it didn't seem right, and I think right now I'm finishing it because now it was right. It's right for me right now to finish it. It is. You have to. And so many things have happened in the world, and it's helped me write this book. And it's that way with writing, and just knew it was right. Just their conversations, that they have with each other.
Yeah.
Now, I love writing dialogue. My problem is that I have to cut it down. I just write pages and pages of dialogue, but then I know them as people. My editor said something lovely to me. She says, "You don't write characters, you write people."
Love it. Beautiful.
And I think that's true. And I don't know where I got that gift. I just know I'm grateful for it. I think that writing is part discipline and desire. And certainly if you don't have discipline and desire and in spades, you'll never be a good writer. But it's also something else that we bring to the table. And that something else is a gift. I never used to think of being a writer as a gift because, first of all, I would deny that I had a gift. I would say, I just would say, you know what, it's work. It's just work. But that's not true. That certainly is partially true, but it's something else that we bring. It's the dreamer in us, the boy in us, the love in us, the willingness to be vulnerable. I think that in American literature, that I studied literature for such a long time, there was so many books that we championed that were really, there's a lot of emotional anorexia going on around in the world. And I told myself, I don't want to be an emotional anorexic in my books. I don't want to be that kind of guy. It's not the kind of guy I am. I'm a different kind of guy. And to write vulnerability is important to me because I think that we need to be vulnerable because that is what, for me, a man is his ability, brave enough to be vulnerable. A long time ago, I was on a panel in a poetry workshop in New Jersey, and there was all these famous poets there. I was with them. There was about 6 of us, of all generations. And they asked us, it was about masculinity, the title. And I think to a person, we all said, how did you learn to be a man? And we all said, our mothers taught us how to be men, which I thought was beautiful. Mm-hmm. I did. I really do think that's really, really beautiful. And I think that one of the things about being a man is to realize, you know what? We need to be feminists. And for me, what that means is that we look at women as equals and as people, instead of in terms of our desire, right? And so it really has taught me to appreciate women. One of the things I think about sometimes is, during the AIDS crisis, and all of that, people got up and spoke and fought. You know who was right there besides the gay men? Lesbians. And they fought fiercely.
Yes.
Fiercely. They weren't, that didn't affect them. Not all these gay men ignored these women, but they didn't care. They were there. And I think that the gay community has never properly thanked them for their courage. And that makes me angry because we should. We're not better because we're men. than they are. And so it's made me think a lot about, and writing women characters like Ari's mother, like Dante's mother. I love to write their characters because I stop and think about women as people and how they feel and how they act and how they behave.
Yeah.
And I love that. Writing has made me a better man, a more compassionate man. Unfortunately, it hasn't erased all my flaws and failures, but hey, that's a lot to ask.
Well, yeah, but that's a beautiful thing, and I think I want to turn into that moment you're talking about. It's made you a more compassionate being, and I think, you know, we're talking right now with the Charter for Compassion, and I think when this book, Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe, it is ultimately, I think the ultimate's what I'm getting and what I think you're saying and what I think Ari learns and both boys learn. The ultimate secret of the universe is compassion for each other, and to recognize each other in the other person. And I just wonder if you had any insight into that before we move into your into some poetry. I'd love to hear you read as well.
Well, that's a good segue, because I wrote a poem, and it's just about that. It's about it's a book of poems I wrote entitled "Dreaming the End of War," and I wrote this book, and it was my attempt to write poetry examining violence and war and the idea of masculinity. And I finished this book, a version of this book, right at the time. But then when I was finished, I realized I had to rewrite it because two things happened that I knew I had to change it. 9/11 and my father died. And so I revisioned the book, and I wrote this one poem. It's a suite of poems, that is about becoming the other, looking at yourself and the other. And I'll just read it. It's called The Fifth Dream: Bullets and Deserts and Borders. A man is walking toward me. He is alone. He has been walking through the desert. He has been walking for days. He has been walking for years. His lips are dry and cracking like a piece of spent soil. I can see his open wounds. His eyes are stark as a Tanzanian night. He discovers I have been watching, though he has long ceased to care what others see. I ask him his name, ask him what his thoughts are, ask him to name his angers and his loves. He opens his mouth to speak, but just as the words hit the air, a bullet pierces his heart. I do not know the country of the man's birth. I only know that he is from the desert. He has the worn look of despair that only rainless days can give. That is all I know. He might have been born in Jerusalem. He might have been born in Egypt. He might have been the direct descendant of a pharaoh. His name might have been Ptolemy. His name might have been Moses or Jesus or Mohammed. He might have been a prophet. He might have been a common thief. He might have been a terrorist, or he might have been just another man destined to be worn down in the desert. Endless, worn down in the desert by the ceaseless, callous storms. He might have come from a country called Afghanistan. He might have come from Mexico. He might have been looking for a well. His dreams were made of water, his lips touching water. Yes, that is what he was dreaming. I can still hear the sound of the bullet. The man reappears. It does not matter that I do not know him, and I do not want him in my dreams. He is searching through the rubble of what was once his house. There are no tears on his face. His lips still yearn for water. I wake. I began to believe that the man has escaped from Auschwitz. Perhaps he perhaps he sinned against the Nazis, or because he was a collaborator, or because he was Jewish, or because he loved another man. He has come to the desert looking for a place to call home. I fall asleep trying to give the man a name. The man is now walking toward a city that is no longer there. I see the man. I see clearly. I am awake now. It is me. It has taken me a long time to know this. I am a Palestinian. I am an Israeli. I am a Mexican. I am an American. I am a busboy in a tall building that is about to collapse. I am attending a Seder, and I am tasting my last bitter herb. I am a boy that has learned all his prayers. I am bowing toward Mecca in a house whose roof will soon collapse on my small frame. I am a servant. I shine shoes and wash the feet of the rich. I am an illegal. I am a Mexican who hates all Americans. I am an American who hates all Mexicans. I am a Palestinian who hates all Israelis. I am an Israeli who hates all Palestinians. I am a Palestinian Jew who hates himself. I am dying of all this knowledge. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like I'm sorry. I am a Palestinian who hates all Israelis. I am an Israeli who hates all Palestinians. I am a Palestinian Jew who hates himself. I am dying of all this knowledge. I am dying of thirst. I am a man that will never know water again. I am becoming dust. I am walking toward my house. Mexico, Washington, Mecca, Jerusalem. I don't know. I am walking in the desert. I see that I am reaching a border. A bullet is piercing my heart.
Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing that poem. It's beautiful. I just wanted to take this time now. Sorry to just jump in a totally different direction, but we're running out of time, which I can't even believe that it's just gone so fast. But we do have some questions from our audience. I would like to start with a comment, because then we can just flow right into the questions. Faith wanted you to know that she hasn't read your book yet, but recently added it to their collection. She works at a community college, and we're growing their YA collection to reach more readers. And she's looking very much forward to reading your work. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then we have David with the first question is, fundamental to compassion is the ability to understand someone else. Your book demonstrates great growth in the characters' deep understanding of each other. Were you intentionally trying to demonstrate what compassion looks like?
Not intentionally, but that's one of the reasons why I write. That I have always believed that literature takes us closer to ourselves and to our desires. And to, I write, it's like I explore the human condition through my work. And I like people, I do. And so that's going to come through. I really do like people. It was, I always hated grading papers because I wanted to give all my students A's, but I knew that wasn't true. And because I liked them all so much, I did, especially the really troublemakers. I adored them, but that doesn't mean that they should get an A. And I just like people. I look at them all the time. And when people say things, I don't listen to people. I don't necessarily just listen to what they're saying. I'm listening to what they're feeling. And that's what I understand as listening. So I think I just bring that to my work.
Thank you so much. And then we have a question from Olivia. She's asking, I'm always curious if the author has their own insights or ahas about themselves while writing a book. Did you have any of these moments, Ben?
All the time. Like all the time, because you write something and you say, where did that come from? And then you ask yourself, is that true? I mean, is that true for me? Because I can write, you write a lot, and I'm a poet, you learn how to put together a beautiful sentence, but that doesn't make it true. So I say, oh my God, that is true. I really believe that. And I go, okay. Or I put it this way, I learned to articulate something that I knew was always there. Yeah. At the end of the book, how could I have ever been ashamed of loving Dante Quintana? That was an insight for me. You should never be ashamed when you love someone, because love is always, in every instant, beautiful.
Thank you for reminding me of that quote. It just gave me the goosies all over again. Thank you. That was just, I remember being very touched by that, and thank you for the reminder. There's another question from David. Ben, since you write so much dialogue, that makes me curious about your process. Do you start with the plot figured out, or do you start with embodying the characters?
Well, it kind of depends what I'm writing. When I'm writing a short story, I have the whole story in my head before I write anything. It's really odd. I forget where I put my keys. Where's my checkbook? Where's my glasses? But I can keep a whole story in my head, which is interesting. So, but when I write it, other things come out. And when I'm writing a novel, I do write a scene so I can get to know the characters, which is the first scene that I wrote between Ari and his mother. I thought, oh, that's them. And then I have to have a story. My problem, of course, is I have my characters in my head and I know them, but I don't have a story. So I have to find a story. I found my story in Ari and Dante. I wrote to the last sentence. Make that last sentence work. Make it seem real, make it feel organic. And I wrote that book to the last sentence. Okay, I'm writing towards that sentence. And it worked for me. And I always do that with short stories. I'll have a first sentence and a last sentence, and then I write the story based on what happens in between. Like I'm writing the story now. And the first line is, when I met him, he was someone else's lover. And then the last sentence is, I never smoked another cigarette. So, of course, it ends badly. Of course, it's a tragedy. I love writing tragedies. I said in one of my poems, the English and the Mexicans love tragedy. The only difference is that the British leave it at the theater and the Mexicans take it home every night. So I have this kind of tragic vision of life, which makes me very Mexican, but I also have this optimism, which is very American. And so, like Aristotle and Dante, it's like, I can't write a tragedy for kids because I want to give young people hope. And I always like to say that the world conspires to take their hope away. And I am not in that conspiracy. I write to give them their hope back.
Yeah.
Because only then will they change the world that we screwed up.
That's so beautiful. There's 1,000 more questions we could ask, and we only have a few more minutes. One thing, it's interesting, this book almost never came to be because it scared you, and you almost didn't finish it. What scared you about writing it, and what were your second thoughts, and how did you push through to keep going and make this story happen?
I thought, well, at a certain point, I remember writing a scene and I just broke down and cried. And I said, I can't do this. And then I gave the excuse of like, no one's going to read it anyway. But then I thought to myself, I remember what William Faulkner said when he accepted the Nobel Prize for Literature. He said that the only story worth writing was the story of the struggle of the human heart against itself.
Hmm.
And the true work of a writer was to banish all fear. And so I said to myself, if I'm a real writer, I must banish all fear. There is nothing to be afraid of nothing, to write fearlessly and honestly. And so I said, I can do that. And so I finished the book.
So glad you did. So glad you did.
I want to thank both of you for being here today. The conversation was amazing. I love your heart, Ben. And Brandon, thank you so much for the amazing questions and your love of Ben and his writing. It just really shone through this interview. So thank you.
Brandon, you're lovely.
I want to just thank everybody for being here. I want to remind you that this webinar is being brought to you by the Charter for Compassion. We appreciate your support of our program. Please donate. And I also want to announce our next global read for December on the 10th. We're having the Senior Writer of Drawdown, which is the most comprehensive plan for reversing global warming. The senior writer, Catherine Wilkinson, will be on with us. So we're super excited about that. And we're working very diligently on a wonderful slate for 2020. So I appreciate, again, your time, your energy, your hearts today. Brandon, we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to have you say goodbye to everybody when we're done.
Wow.
So thanks again, guys, so much.
Thank you. I have so many questions still. I wouldn't even know how to pick one last one, but I guess, we've been talking about Ari and Dante, this book, and you've written so many other novels. I think at least 20 other books. And I'm wondering if you want to mention any of your other works that reflect the things you find important in life. You've really, every book you write has something special to it for sure. And just.
Well, I did write a book. I have two young adult novels that I think that really I'm very proud of having written. And one of them is Sammy and Juliana in Hollywood, which is about my growing up years and racism and all these difficulties. And a book called Last Night I Sang to the Monster. And Zach begins the book by saying, most people have dogs. Not me. I have a therapist. I'd rather have a dog. So, it's about a young man who wakes up in a residential treatment center and he's 18 years old and he doesn't remember how he got there. So it's a very healing book.
Yeah. Well, I think all your work is healing, Ben, and I think, and we said this in an earlier conversation, your work creates magic, and the people who come to you and say that they have felt moved by it is because they themselves are tuned into that magic, and they are tuned into their own magic within. And that's what you draw out in us through your work. And so I just want to thank you for all that you do and for putting yourself out there, for pushing through that fear that you did to create such a masterpiece of a novel for all of us to just thrive in and enjoy for years to come. And I look forward to many, 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 many more books from you in the future, and especially part 2, not to put any pressure on you.
Me too.
Ari and Dante.
I can't wait for the sequel.
Yeah.
Thanks so much again, guys, for being here. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for being here.